Well, very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of Perceptive Learning Zone. And today we continue our discussion on Indo-Pak ties and what the future holds for the two countries in Southeast Asia, especially in the aftermath of the ceasefire. 10 days after a May 10th ceasefire pulled India and Pakistan back from the brink of a full-fledged war following days of rapidly escalating military tensions, a battle of narratives has broken out and each country has been claiming victory over the other. Now, this conflict erupted after gunmen killed 26 civilians in Pahalgam in Indian administered Kashmir on April 22. And there was a little known armed group by the name of TRF, the Resistance Front, which initially claimed responsibility, and India accused Pakistan of backing it. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi promised retaliation, even though Pakistan denied any role in the attack. And after a series of tit for tat diplomatic measures between the neighbors, the tensions exploded militarily. And early on the morning of 7th May, India fired missiles at what it described as terrorist bases, not just in Pakistan administered Kashmir, but also four sites were targeted in Pakistan's Punjab province. And in the following days, both sides launched killer drone strikes at each other's territory and blamed one another for initiating the attacks. The tensions peaked afterwards again when India and Pakistan fired missiles at each other's military bases. India initially targeted three Pakistani air bases, including one in Rawalpindi, the garrison city, which is home to the headquarters of the Pakistan Army, before then launching projectiles at other Pakistani bases. Pakistan's missiles, they targeted military installations across the country's frontier with India, and Indian administered Kashmir, striking at least four facilities. Then, as the world braced for total war between nuclear armed neighbors, the US President Donald Trump announced a ceasefire, which he claimed had been mediated by the United States. And Pakistan expressed gratitude to the US, even as India insisted the decision to halt firing was made solely by the two neighbors without any form of third party intervention. Since the announcements, both countries have held news conferences presenting evidence of their achievements. On Monday, senior military officials in India and Pakistan, they spoke by phone, pledging to uphold the ceasefire in the coming days. So, what are the main talking points? What are the unresolved dilemmas, especially in the aftermath of the ceasefire? I would say that in the days before launching the military operation, India had announced a flurry of diplomatic measures against Pakistan, including suspending a key water sharing treaty, hence halting most visas and stopping all trade. And in response, Islamabad had announced its own series of tit for tat actions, including the suspension of visas for Indians, the trade ban, as well as the closure of its airspaces to Indian flights. None of these punitive measures have been reversed by both countries so far. And if we talk about it one by one, let's see how things stand between two neighbors in terms of the measures announced since the Pahalgam attack. First of all, let's talk about the suspension of the Indus Water Treaty. In his first public comment on the strike, I remember Narendra Modi said that India's stand is absolutely clear. Terror and talks cannot go cannot go hand in hand. Water and blood, they cannot flow together, he added. His his comments, they align with media reports citing sources that say that the key water sharing treaty between India and Pakistan, known as the Indus Water Treaty, it remains suspended. Now, this treaty, formulated initially in 1960 and formulated by the world, brokered, I would say, by the World Bank, it governs water sharing of six rivers in the Indus Basin between the two countries. The Indus Water Treaty has survived two wars between the countries and was held up as an example of trans-boundary water management until its suspension late month. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif Sahib, he had earlier said that he believed the water issue with India could be resolved through peaceful negotiations. India's decision to suspend the treaty, it marks a significant diplomatic shift. Pakistan, it depends heavily on these rivers for agriculture as well as civilian water supply. Pakistan's finance minister Mohammad Aurangzeb told the Reuters news agency that water cannot be weaponized and unilateral withdrawal has no legal basis. But experts say it's nearly impossible for India to hold back tens of billions of cubic meters of water from the western rivers during high flow periods. It lacks both the massive storage infrastructure and the extensive canals that are needed to divert such volumes. However, if India begins controlling the flow with its existing and potential infrastructure, Pakistan could feel the impact of this during the dry season. And soon after India suspended the Indus-War Treaty, Pakistan threatened to suspend in 1972 peace treaty called the Simla Agreement, which established the line of control or de facto border between the countries. And it hasn't suspended this so far. The next talking point is the suspension of visas as well as expulsion of diplomats. India scaled down its diplomatic relations with Pakistan as part of its retaliatory measures. It expelled all Pakistani defense attaches, declaring them persona non grata, that is, unwelcome, and announced it would withdraw its own defense advisors from its high commission in Islamabad. Pakistan has responded with similar steps. Both countries, they reduced the staff at their respective high commissions, and they've also suspended almost all visas given to people from the other country. Next up, if we talk about closing of borders, as part of their retaliatory measures, both India and Pakistan, they shut down the Wagah-Atari border, the only land crossing between the two countries. Now, this border, ladies and gentlemen, which is heavily guarded and requires special permits to cross, has long been used by people visiting family members, attending weddings, or reconnecting with loved ones across the border. Both countries initially gave the citizens nearly a week to return, but the deadline was later extended. For days, emotional scenes unfolded at the border as families were separated, with some people staying behind. After the 7th May strikes, India also announced that it would be closing entry from its side to the Kartarpur Sahib corridor, which allows Indian pilgrims to visit one of Sikhism's holiest shrines in Pakistan without a visa. And almost 2 lakh Indians, they visited for your information, they visited the Kartarpur Shrine between 2021 and 2023. And this is something that was obviously confirmed by Indian officials last year also. The latest figures have not yet been released. Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri told reporters last week that the suspension would remain in place until further notice. Furthermore, if we talk about closing airspace, Pakistan also announced the closure of its airspace to all Indian flights. In the following days, India responded with similar restrictions, closing its airspace to all Pakistani flights, both military as well as commercial. And international flights are now being forced to take longer, costlier detours, increasing both travel time as well as fuel expenses. Next up, if you talk about another, talking point after the ceasefire, that is suspension of trade. The two countries have suspended all direct as well as indirect trade. Now, the experts they opine, fellows, that the impact on India would be minimal, but because it does not import much from Pakistan. However, it creates bigger problems for us. Already struggling with high inflation and a weak economy, Pakistan could face more pressure as it loses access to trade routes and crucial goods from India, such as raw materials and medicines. However, analysts say that neither side can truly claim to have emerged from the post April 22 crisis with a definitive upper hand. Instead, they say both India and Pakistan they can claim strategic gains even as they each also suffered the losses. And finally, I'd say, in fact, second last main talking point is the internationalization of the Kashmir issue, which is Pakistan's gain. And this military standoff, we have to understand it had roots in the two countries' dispute over the Kashmir region. And Pakistan and India, just to give you a bit of a backdrop, they administer different parts of Kashmir along with China, which governs two narrow strips. And India claims that all of Kashmir, while Pakistan claims, the part India administers. After the 1971 war between India and Pakistan, which led to the creation of Bangladesh, New Delhi and Islamabad, they inked the Simla Agreement, which may, among other things, committed them to settling the differences by peaceful means through bilateral negotiations. Since then, India has argued that the Kashmir dispute and other tensions between the neighbors, it can only be settled bilaterally without third-party intervention. Pakistan, however, has cited the United Nations resolutions to call for the global community to play a role in the in pushing for a solution. On Sunday, Donald Trump said that the U.S. was ready to help mediate a resolution to the Kashmir dispute. Walter Ludwig is a senior lecturer at King's College London, and he said that the latest conflict gave Pakistan a chance to internationalize the Kashmir issue, which had been its long-standing strategic goal. And this was a statement to Al Jazeera, which I'm just going to quote over here, that Islamabad welcomed mediation from a range of countries, including the US, framing the resulting ceasefire as evidence of the need for external involvement. By contrast, Walter remarked that India had to accept a ceasefire brokered externally rather than ending the conflict on its own terms. Then we looked at what was said by the South Asia editor for the Diplomat magazine, Mr. Sudha Ramachandran. He remarked that the Modi's government in India may have strengthened its nationalist support base through its military operations, though it also may have perceivably lost some domestic political points with the ceasefire. It was able to score points among its nationalist hawkish support base, but the ceasefires have not gone down well among the hardliners. However, analysts also say that the spiral's intentions last week and its trigger in the form of Pahalgam attack, they helped India as well. Diplomatically, India succeeded in refocusing international attention on Pakistan-based militant groups, renewing calls for Islamabad to take meaningful action. These are obviously the words of Walter Ludwig again that I'm quoting over here. He referred to the reputational cost for Pakistan of once again having been associated with militant groups operating from its soil. And he goes on to remark further that while Islamabad denied involvement and called for neutral investigations, the burden of proof in international forums increasingly rests on Pakistan to demonstrate proactive counterterrorism efforts. Now, India has long accused Pakistan of financing, training, as well as sheltering armed groups that support the secession of Kashmir from India. And Pakistan, it insists that it only provides diplomatic and moral support to Kashmir's separatist movement. Also, we feel that planes down may be Pakistan's gain. What do we mean by this, right? So India claimed that its May 7 strikes killed more than 100 terrorists. Pakistan said that the Indian missiles, they hit mosques and residential areas, killing 40 civilians, including children, apart from 11 military personnel. And Islamabad also claimed that it scrambled its fighter planes to respond and it brought down multiple Indian jets. Now, India has neither confirmed nor denied those claims, but Pakistan's military has publicly shared details that it says identify the planes that were shot down. And French and US officials have confirmed that at least one Rafale and one Russian-made jet were lost by India. Indian officials have also confirmed to Al Jazeera that at least two planes crashed in Indian administered territory, but did not clarify which country they belong to. So with both India and Pakistan agreeing that neither side's jets had crossed their frontier, the presence of debris from a crashed plane in Indian administered territory suggests that they were likely Indian. These were the words of the analysts. Also, Muhammad Shoaib is an academic and security analyst at Quaid-e-Azam University in Pakistan. In Islamabad, he called India's strikes against Pakistan a strategic miscalculation. And he says that their reading of Pakistan's ability to hit back was deeply, inherently flawed. And also, we feel that further reach across the border may be India's gain. In many ways, some analysts say that the more meaty military accomplishment was India's, because in addition to Kotli and Muzaffarabad in Pakistan-administered Kashmir, Indian missiles also targeted four sites in Punjab, which I said at the very beginning, right? Pakistan's most populous state and the country's economic nerve center. Over the next 2 days, India also fired drones that reached deep inside Pakistani territory, including major population centers like Lahore and Karachi. And on the 10th of May, India's missiles, they hit 3 Pakistani air bases that were deeper in Pakistan's Punjab than the Indian bases Pakistan hit that day, which were in Indian territory. Simply put, you can say impartially that India demonstrated greater reach than Pakistan did. It was the first time since the 1971 war between them that India had managed to hit Punjab. Launching a military response not just across the line of control, the two countries' de facto border in Kashmir, but deep into Pakistan had been India's primary goal as per Ramchandran, and India achieved it. So now that we have discussed these main talking points, the main question is that will the ceasefire hold? Um, military officials from both countries, agreed to hold the ceasefire. They agreed to take immediate steps to reduce their troops' presence along the borders. Obviously, more rounds of talks are expected to feature. Still, if you talk about the Stimson Center, they believe the ceasefire could hold. Both sides, well, they face constraints and opportunities that have emerged during the course of last week, which on balance could make the ceasefire potentially a better outcome for them. So, in conclusion, Walter Ludwig has echoed that view that truce reflects mutual interest in de escalation, even if it does not resolve the tensions that lead to the crisis. And he says that India has significantly changed the rules of the game in this episode. The Indian government, it seems to have completely dispensed with the game that allows Islamabad and Rawalpindi to claim plausible deniability regarding anti Indian terrorist groups. And what the Pakistani government and military do with groups on its soil would seem to be the key factor in determining how robust the ceasefire will be in the future. And once again, Quaid-e-Azam University's Shoaib, who is also a research fellow at George Mason University in the US, emphasized the importance of continued dialogue. He warned that maintaining peace will depend on security dynamics in both Indian administered Kashmir as well as Pakistan's Balochistan province. And just as India accuses Pakistan of supporting cross-border separatism. Similarly, Islamabad alleges that New Delhi backs a separatist insurgency in Balochistan, which is a claim that India obviously categorically denies. So, any subsequent bout of violence has the so to conclude, I will say that any subsequent bout of violence has the potential to get bloodier as well as more widespread. And both sides going for a war of attrition, they could inflict significant damage on urban populations without gaining anything from the conflict. Well, that'll be all for now, fellas. May God keep us safe in these testing times. Thank you very much and stay blessed, all of you, and have a lovely evening. Assalamu alaikum.